Thank you. We'll now move to our panel speakers. They're supposed to have 8 minutes each, but in order to get some question and answers in, if they can talk a little less than that, that would be much appreciated. We don't have Dr. Kendal Nassan with us, unfortunately, President of the Kurdish Institute in Paris, but we're delighted that Joyce Blau has been able to come in his stead, and I will now ask her to address us. Thank you very much. Just speak.
Does it works? Yes. It works, yes. Well, my paper deals with the role of the diaspora then and now. I would like to stress on the fact that in the 1980s, there were few Kurdish activists in Europe, and also or pro-Kurdish activists in Europe. Among them, and many of them were women. And most prominent of all was, of course, Madame Danielle Mitterrand. But there was also Claudia Roth in Germany, Mirella Galetti in Italy, Anne Cloud in Great Britain, were women who, as usual, are underrepresented in this conference. We work very much and we are not invited. For my part, I have been committed to supporting the Kurdish cause for practically half a century. I have known, supported a number of Kurdish leaders and activists from Iraq, from Iran, intellectuals from Turkey, Syria, and from ex-Soviet Union, who have all become my friends. For many years, I have taught the Kurdish language and literature at the Sorbonne in Paris, and published a number of works and dozens of articles to make Kurdish culture better known. The creation 30 years ago of the Kurdish Institute of Paris in February 1983 has enabled Kurdish artists and intellectuals, as well as friends of the Kurds like myself, to unite in a modern and independent institution, and so pool our skills, our energy, and our network of relations so as better to serve the Kurdish cause. From its very creation, the Kurdish Institute of Paris had to devote a great part of its means to the issue of the massive violations of human rights in the different parts of Kurdistan. In Iran, since the jihad declared in August 1979 against the Kurds, who were declared children of Satan by the Ayatollah Khomeini. The repression was massive. In Turkey, over 140,000 people were arrested following the army's coup d'etat of September 1980, mostly for crimes of opinion. Last but not least, the Ba'ath regime in Iraq, taking advantage of an international situation in its favor, because of its war with Iran, started to carry out its project for a final solution of the Kurdish question. Before, the young Turks, in the course of the World War I, perpetrated with impunity the century's first genocide against the Armenians in the Ottoman Empire. Later, Hitler took advantage of the situation of World War II to commit his genocide against the Jewish people and the Gypsies. the deportation of 8,000 Barzanis in August 1983 was the opening shot of a series of genocidal campaigns that lasted 5 years and that, according to Kurdish estimates, caused 182,000 victims. At the Kurdish Institute, we regularly received information provided by the Iraqi Kurdish organizations, but also more confidentially from the testimony of Dr. Abdulrahman Qassemlou's Iranian Kurdistan Democratic Party leaders. We published, translated into French and into English, these cases and distributed them to human rights NGOs, to the media, to the political parties in France and to other European countries. But in the absence of pictures and of direct access by the media witnesses, we were unable to break the wall of silence that surrounded the Kurdish tragedy that was taking place, despite of all our efforts and all our contacts. Indeed, the political context was particularly difficult in view of the expansionist aims of the Ayatollah's Iran, which was seeking to export its Islamic revolution. France, described as the little Satan by Khomeini, was Baghdad's, at this time, principal Western ally. The Iraqi lobby in France, including the Gaullists and the extreme right, they included also many socialist leaders, as well as powerful armaments manufacturers and building companies that controlled a major part of the press. Saddam Hussein then appeared in the eyes of these people to be a modern and secular leader, protector of the Christians, and surely a profitable commercial partner who knew how to show his generosity to the friends of Iraq and to those carrying out propaganda in favor of his regime. To cap it all, the Kurdish political parties were at that time divided, and there were intermittent conflicts between them. The fact that they were all based in Iran made them seem to be allies of Iran. They were not very credible and so unheard in the media. For a long time, we experienced a great difficulty in securing French visas to enable their leaders to come to Paris for our actions of speeding information and raising awareness in public opinion and in political circles. One of our regular activities was the publication in several languages, including English, of a monthly bulletin. I brought an example about the Kurdish, that was the Winds of Death, about the Kurdish news, which we distributed to documentation centers, to the principal media, to NGOs, to private individuals in 85 countries throughout the world, as gradually to create a worldwide network of friends of the Kurds. We published special files on the Anfal campaign on Halabja, published periodical and books, and including the French edition of Human Rights Watch Genocide in Iraq, with a preface by a very renowned French intellectual, Monsieur Pierre Vidal-Naquet. We organized dozens of seminars and lectures in Paris and several French towns, as well as in Spain, Italy, Switzerland, Germany, and in the European Parliament to make known the fate of the Iraqi Kurds. Kendal Nizan published a number of articles in newspapers, spoke in the radio, on TV, and no, I can't. I have to go up to the end. I have to explain the role of the diaspora. We were the most important. He met governments. He went to the Vatican, to the World Council of Churches, to warn them about genocide taking place in Iraq. Following Halabja, he went on behalf of the International Federation of Human Rights in Paris to the UN Human Rights Subcommission in Geneva to bear witness and demand that Iraq be condemned. However, in August 1988, this subcommission of UN Human Rights decided to take no further action. In fact, even after Halabja, Iraq's allies, including US, through a United Nations fact-finding mission, tried to whitewash Iraq by claiming that it was not fully established that the Iraqi army had used poison gas, and that it could equally have come from Iran. At that time, our friend Peter Galbraith, after an investigation on the spot, made a remarkable report to the US Senate on the question. In a recent book, A Poisonous Affair, Joost Hilterman makes a fully documented analysis of this disinformation maneuvers in favor of the Iraqi regime. It was in this most appalling context that Kendal Nizan persuaded Madame Danielle Mitterrand to visit, and he spoke about it, to visit the Iraqi Kurdish refugee camps in Turkey, to collect from them and publicize their testimony. After several months of administrative and diplomatic obstruction, Madame Mitterrand visited Turkish Kurdistan in May 1989, where she spent 3 days and met the Kurdish survivors of the genocide and heard their evidence. Madame Mitterrand returned outraged, shaken, and more than ever determined to commit herself to the Kurdish cause. It was no longer just a matter of making the media aware, but of convincing the great powers to act. At Kendal Nizan's proposal, Madame Mitterrand went first of all to Moscow, where she had a meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev and his wife Raisa, who she already knew. She informed them of the Kurdish tragedy in Iraq and asked for their support. Then Danielle Mitterrand, during an official visit to the United States, gave to the Bushes, to President Bush and his wife, an account of her visit to the camps of the survivors of the Kurdish genocide. This event is described in Barbara Bush's memoirs. To ease the destitution of some of these survivors and to ease the international media's access to their evidence, Danielle Mitterrand convinced the French government to accommodate 1,000 of these survivors in France at the summer of 1989. Her visit to the camps also foiled the Turkish plan to send back to Iraq several hundreds of Iraqi Kurdish political leaders and soldiers who were amongst the refugees. The next stage of the Kurdish Institute's activity, carried out in close cooperation with Daniel Mitterrand's foundation, France Liberté, was to bring together all Kurdish and pro-Kurdish associates throughout the world with a view of internationalizing the Kurdish question. At this end, we organized in Paris a series of international conferences, of which the most important were held in Paris in 1989, in Moscow in July 1990, and in Washington in 27 February 1991. The Paris Conference of October 1989 brought together delegations from 32 countries and representatives of all Kurdish political parties. It also gained considerable media coverage thanks to the presence of very important public figures. U.S. Senator Claiborne Pell of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Madame Hélène Bonner, and Andrei Sakharov's wife, Andrei Sakharov, was not allowed to come to Paris. Lord Avebury, Edward Kennedy, and Chancellor Kreisky sent messages of support to our conference. And Bernard Kouchner, of course, a defender of the Kurdish cause since his first visit to Kurdistan on behalf of Médecins du Monde in 1974, he didn't say, took part in this conference, which his Secretary of State of Humanitarian Action co-financed, as well as did our friend Peter Galbraith. It is Peter Galbraith who enabled us to organize a conference in the United States Senate on 27 February 1991. A conference...
Can I ask you to come to the end,
yes.
please?
You don't want to know what we have been done?
No, I'm afraid we've got
yes.
lots of other speakers as well, and we have to finish in 25 minutes.
I'll shorten. On the fate, so thanks to Peter's activism and to the presence of Madame Mitterrand, 6 leading U.S. senators, including Edward Kennedy, John Kerry, Nancy Pelosi, and Claiborne Pell, took part in this conference. And there they met the principal Iraqi Kurdish leaders who had been invited. These exchanges made these public figures more aware of the issue and played a crucial role during the Kurdish exodus and the creation of the Kurdish protection zone. I want to stress on the fact that at this period, the U.S. State Department had refused to receive the Iraqi leaders Jalal Talabani, Hushyar Zebari, and Sami Abdul Rahman, who had come to take part in our conference.
Can I ask you to come to an end, please?
Okay. Also, we made a conference in...
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, I am going to have to stop you because we do need to hear from the other speakers, and we only have till 10 to 1, and that's a firm deadline. I have to be away at that time. So thank you very much. So can I now ask my good colleague and co-chair of the all-party parliamentary group, Nadhim Zahawi, to talk to us about the role of the diaspora. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Meg, and apologies for being late. Excellencies, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, I was asked to speak about the role of the diaspora then and now, and I've begun to think about what I'm going to say today, And I thought, actually, I'm not qualified to speak about the role of the diaspora. There are many people on this panel who are far more qualified than I am, including Dr. Kushner and our previous speaker, on the work that they've done over many decades with the Kurdish people. So I thought what I will talk to you about is my own experience. My family came to the UK in the 70s. I was 8 years old. It was a tough time for us. My father had to escape from Iraq. His only crime was being Kurdish and not willing to belong to the Ba'ath Party. When we arrived here, as a child, I couldn't speak English properly, so I had to sort of think about the words I want to put together and then try and deliver them on my first days at school. And I remember very, very vividly gatherings in the evenings at home with many Kurds here in London, Hushar Zibari, Ibrahim Ahmed, and others, and all they would be discussing over drinks and mezza is how to remove the tyrant Saddam Hussein. Now, my own engagement really only started in the 90s. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, as many of you will remember. And the perception in the UK was that the Iraqi population was supporting Saddam Hussein in that adventure. And I just felt, I was a young man, I had a day job, but I felt I needed to come out and demonstrate to the British people that the Iraqi people were not supporting Saddam Hussein. So I had the idea of organizing a march through London. And of course, I wasn't affiliated with any political party. And so I had to create my own organization. I called it the People of Iraq Against Saddam Hussein. And went along to Scotland Yard down the road to ask for permission to hold a demonstration in London. I have to say, at the time, a lot of my father's friends, the real, the real fighters, the real Peshmerga, the real people who made the difference, were slightly concerned, and many of them advised me against it. Said, look, this problem is much deeper and much more complex than you understand, young man. Really, you ought to just leave this alone. And actually, I now understand. At the time, I didn't really understand what they were getting at. I now absolutely understand it. And part of their reticence was their fear for me, because they thought, if you organize a demonstration in England, it may be treated in a similar way as it may be treated in Iraq. And of course, it's very different, as many of you will know. Anyway, so when we organized the demonstration, there was a bunch of young people here in London. We didn't know who would turn up. And I have to tell you, it was admirable, the engagement from the KDP, from the PUK, from all the parties, from the other parties from Iraq, from the Shia community, who were as oppressed by Saddam. And the first march attracted something like 2,500 people, which is extraordinary. It made headlines. We were on the front page of newspapers and on television. And that then led me to do more and organize a second march, which became even bigger. We had, I think, over 10,000 people on that march. And then my boss at work heard that, or I brought to his attention that Jeffrey Archer, who was a high-profile conservative in the Conservative Party of the time under John Major's government, was planning, because of the pictures that were coming through, if you remember, after the Iraqi forces were repelled and pushed back to Iraq, Saddam maintained the ability to fly his helicopter gunships. And that's when the real tragedy occurred, the real murder of that period occurred. Jeffrey had launched a campaign to try and help the Kurds. And so I said this to my boss. My boss picked up the phone and called him, said, look, can we help you in any way? Turned up to a meeting, and I was told, young man, I've got 21 days to help your people. If you can do anything, report to me tomorrow morning if you can take time off. My boss gave me the time off, and I spent 21 days organizing the Simple Truth campaign, which was an extraordinary campaign. We raised 55 million people through the British Red Cross and the UN, and the BBC gave us 7 hours of live television, televised around the world. Harvey Goldsmith came in with all the artists. We had everyone playing there that was famous at the time. We then organized our visit to see the work of the British Red Cross and the UN in Kurdistan, and Kakushar accompanied us from London. When we arrived, I will never forget, I still have the picture of him meeting Jeffrey Archer across the Zab Minor, literally in the middle of the river. Kak Nature insisted that he would be responsible for our trip and drive the lead car with Jeffrey and the team. And we spent 3 days there seeing the harrowing, really disturbing sort of images of what was taking place there and then, the people in refugee camps, but also then visiting Qushtapa, which is probably the most haunting image that will live with me forever of the women, only women, no men at all in black, thousands in Qushtapa, and then going across, and the same thing when we arrived in Sully with Kak Khosrow, absolutely insisting that he must drive the lead car and lead the delegation, and arriving in Halabja on a rainy Kurdish morning and seeing for ourselves what took place in that town really made me determined to continue to fight, to continue to raise the profile, to get as many friends involved. And I have to just sort of at this point just remember John Major and the work he did, both in supporting Simpletons, but also in the supporting, the leading on the no-fly zone. I will end with this, Meg, because I don't want to go over my time. I think the best way the diaspora can help is to get involved. Get involved in your local community, in the countries that you live in. Put something back in those countries that have offered you safe haven, whether through charities, through local government. I became a councillor in Wandsworth for three terms, 12 years. Join political parties. I'd love you to all join the Conservative Party, of course, but I'm sure some of you will want to join Meg's party too. But join political parties, get involved, be active in your community. That's the way you can help your countrymen and women. That's the way you can influence decisions around the world of politicians, of leaders, and so on. So I'll leave it there and we'll take questions. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, and I personally can't think of anybody better in the UK to speak for the diaspora, and also I'm delighted that the training of Mr Speaker in keeping to time at least worked for you, Nadhim, so thank you very much indeed. I'm now delighted to ask the former Minister of Sport and Youth and the activist in the Kurdish community in Sweden, Kak Taha Barwary, to speak to us, please.
Very much. It is difficult to be against the screen and show some PowerPoints. Thank you very much for invitation today to be part of this very interesting and needed conference. And there are 3-4 occasions today that are collecting a lot of memories from the past. I would like to talk about as you can see from the experts, Kurdish experts that are working on the diaspora. One of them is Dr. Khaled Khayati, that divides the arrival of the Kurds to Europe in 3 major periods. One is that emergence of the Kurdish diaspora, 70s to 80s. Of course, before that, we all know that we have been in Europe, that Kurdistan Student Society, for example, has been one of the active organizations that previously, after the World War II, after that, has been working very hardly for the Kurdish issue. And also, Nowruz have been the symbol of the Kurdish nation that have been celebrated everywhere in Europe. Second is, of course, primacy of victim diaspora discourse that we have been struggling a lot to be recognized in the new societies. Many of the people didn't know who the Kurds were, what they are suffering from, and why they are fleeing from their countries that they are divided in. I would like to and then, because the time is short, I have to try to match as much as possible to. The Kurds have been very active in diaspora, and my focus will be, of course, in Sweden, because I'm there, and I'm very proud to say that Kurdish community in Sweden is one of the most active. We have now 6 parliamentarians with the Kurdish backgrounds from all parts of Kurdistan in the Swedish parliament, which is amazing. I think we are unique in that part. So we have been really integrated and participating. We are now not only refugees or diaspora, very active and participated diaspora. A lot of things has been done for the Anfal and Halabja, of course, and really Kurdistan was now became known for everybody, especially after the Halabja and Anfal campaigns. And of course, we have to recognize all the efforts that has been done by the Kurdish political parties and Kurdish diaspora in European countries. And of course, as Ms. Joyce Blau mentioned, there were not many people that were then interested in the Kurdish issue, so it has been difficult really to engage and to activate and to mobilize opinion in that time for the Kurdish issue. After Halabja, of course, I remember one of the things that many distinguished speakers talked about. People were not talking about the Halabja. I have to say in Sweden, we were received by Swedish Prime Minister Ingvar Carlsson then, I remember very well, and the Swedish representative to the Disarmament Commission in Switzerland, Mr. Rolf Ekéus, condemned officially the use of chemical weapons in Halabja. So that was really a major achievement of the Kurdish diaspora, and also, of course, the thing that distinguished then Kurds in Sweden, one of the Swedish elite journalists, Stefan Hjertén, visited Halabja 2 or 3 days after what happened, and he came back. He worked for the Swedish TT, Swedish news agency, and that really affected a lot to change the opinion. And we have also to recognize that even Mr. Gwen Roberts, he is here, but his film that helped us a lot in promoting the Kurdish issue, because he went it, of course, through the Kurdish leadership. He gathered the soil from the Kurdistan affected areas and tested in laboratory in UK, and that document really helped us a lot in promoting the Kurdish case in that time, which was very, very difficult, I have to say. We had also that difficulties in a way or another to not meet high-level people. As the Prime Minister of Kurdistan, when he visited Sweden, he said that in a reception that people were used to receive us in cafeterias, not official places. Now we are received in the foreign ministries and the prime minister offices in Europe, and that is really a major achievement that has been a very important step to promote the Kurdish issue. Another thing that Kurds have been, I think we have to highlight the role of the Kurdish diaspora. Then Kurdish movement was not that weak, that strong when it comes to the possibilities. For example, I remember many times Dr. Mahmoud Osman, that our veteran politician, has visited Sweden with many other Kurdish leaders. That has been Swedish Confederation of Kurds in Sweden acted really as an embassy for the Kurds and tried to be a point that really contacted. It was less sensitive because they were migrants, diaspora, to reach the authorities in Sweden to make meetings and to talk about these atrocities. I have been working with many fields, so allow me to talk about different roles that I have. I have been representative of Kurdistan regional government in Nordic countries. And one thing in 2 periods. One was that 92, me and another friend from PUK were representatives then of the parliament and Kurdistan regional government, Mr. Ari Reza from PUK. And the thing that I would like to mention is there were no funds from the Kurdistan. We gathered funds, and there were people came to the office, Kurds, crying they wanted to be part of the contribution to run the office. So we have people that paid in Sweden, that we have for the first time in the history something that we could be proud of in that is our representation. Unfortunately, that was until '94. We all know what happened. I don't want to go back to that dark days. That chapter, fortunately, is closed, and we are all proud that now Kurds are more united than ever. This is one of the activities I am very proud, and Mr. Fredrik Malm, who is here as MP in Sweden, we created something that Kurd Gala. Kurd Gala was an event that everybody wanted to be part of that, because there were celebrities, there were ministers, dignitaries, embassies that really wanted to be part of this through cultural activity. The concept of this Kurd Gala was that we awarded the most active Kurds during the year, the most active friends of the Kurds during the year, and also those that has been for years that has been working honorary hours to this gala. And I have to say something that is in Sweden it was very much appreciated. In Kurdistan, many bad articles has been written about this, that we wasted money in this issue. So this is also another thing that is, and unfortunately it comes from the parliamentarian in that should be creating relationship with the outside. Those people consciously targeted this, and these people, when you can see one of them, for example, now, these two that everybody knows in Sweden, Mr. Öznujan and Nishti Sterk, they are comedians, and now it will be difficult to see to the Swedish TV when you don't see a Kurdish singer, a Kurdish comedian, a Kurdish MP. So we are really part of the establishment in the high level, I could say. Another thing that was very important in this Kurdish Gala, we funded Kurdistan Student Union in a Swedish university, regardless of the political colors, to write something about the Kurdistan in gymnasium level and also in university level. And these were through a jury that were selected and the winners of it. Through this, we wanted to add to the Kurdish references in the universities and also promote those people that are working on these issues. One cannot ignore that in Sweden, for example, we have no statistics to say, but today I could say 10,000 of the Kurdish young go to schools from the primary school to gymnasium. It is an army of nation builders that are raised in, I'm sure, in other parts of the world where the possibilities is existing, this progress is made. And we have to see that is a new reality that we have really to see how to use this in right way. Sorry, 1 minute. I will say something else that I had promised to. That I think it is highly time that KRG recognize the efforts of the diaspora. It is not working to say to them, come to Kurdistan, be part of the process without really facilitating the real possibilities for these people. I could say in Iraq there is a migration ministry. Of course, what Kak Falah said, I'm sure his office, what he has done, it is remarkable achievements. But I don't think anywhere. I have been trying to focus in many countries. Just to mention some examples, Ministry of Overseas of Indian Affairs has been established 2004. Ministry of Diaspora of Republic of Armenia, 2008. The Information Diaspora Minister of Israel, 2009. Kosovo Diaspora Agency 2012, States Ministry of Georgia for Diaspora Issues, Ministry of Employment, Trade, Industry and Diaspora Affairs, Dominica, Chinese Diaspora Ministry, Bosnia-Herzegovina. These are some examples that I just wanted to highlight. I hope that this is facilitated and this suggestions is taken into serious consideration. And this would be, I can say to my colleague, that Mr. Mahmoud Aram, His Excellency has been doing a very good job. But I think if there is a good connection between the Kurdish students outside and the Kurdish university inside, to try to really collect this, all what you said, for example, it is a difficulty. My opinion is that Kurdish recognition of Kurdish Anfal goes through Hawler to Baghdad and from Baghdad to outside, not in contrary. This is a very important step that we have to recognize, because what Your Excellency mentioned, I am one of this that follow a lot, but I haven't seen this documentation that to be used. I hear, for example, in the media in Kurdistan that Iraq has only high tribunal has recognized Anfal. If that is the case, where is the apology from the Iraqi government? I think you have to make a lot of opinion to push and press Iraq. And apology is needed, not because they have committed, because they are the ruler of Iraq and responsible for the state Iraq actions. Sweden did, for 2 years ago, sorry, this is very important, mistreatment of the children in Sweden in institution during 1900. A thorough investigation was made for 2 years ago. A formal apology came from the Swedish government, and a compensation for 225,000, 250,000 Swedish crowns were delivered to each of the victims. I think it is very important. This is something I'm very afraid that with this mentality that I'm seeing in Iraq, Anfal's Halabjas are in the way in the near future. I'm afraid to say that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and I know how hard it is to try and say what you want to say in a few minutes. But unfortunately, from my perspective, I'm going to have to leave you. I'm delighted that my colleague Gary Kent, who supports our all-party group, is going to take over the chair from me. I'm catching a flight. I'm off to do a workshop with some female MPs from the region, and planes don't wait, I'm afraid. So I am going to have to leave you. I wish you all the best with the rest of the conference, and if I can ask Gary to come up as we begin to hear from Professor Dlawer Al-Din, who's a great friend and who I first met in a flat in my constituency, which is a completely different story. I'm really sorry that I can't stay. I still can't stay for your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just carry on 3 minutes. That's long. Well, thank you, Meg. Meeting you, that was part of lobbying in your own constituency. Worse than being last speaker is being the one before last. Because instead of having one person standing between you and your lunch, you'll have two. And 10 minutes reduced to 3, so I'm going to have to be very punctual. From the beginning, I'll tell you what I would like to say, and that is a small group of people and a very small community in the 1980s managed to have such an impact to make a difference, to influence decision, to lobby and mobilize the media, the governments, the parliament, and make history. The example is actually a prime example of how small community of only a few hundred people in places like London and a few dozens of activists could actually make a difference. Now we have KRG, we have a federal entity inside Iraq, and we have a larger diaspora than ever before. We have greater community, we have new generations of second generations of Kurds coming up, professionals, well-linked, wide network, excellent friends, and we have, obviously, well-connected government to the, on the international stage that can actually mobilize the diplomatic and political spheres. Therefore, we really need to identify the niches that we need to occupy these days. And there are great niches that are not yet occupied. This diaspora that I mentioned and everybody else mentioned have not yet been exploited or used to the advantage of our common cause. The gap between the KRG network and the government and the Kurdish communities abroad are still wide. We really need to invest in those and play roles in getting people connected and mobilize the potential energy that is actually present. I'm going to have to tell you a few things about how we managed to influence decision, and that was really to back the political statements that were mostly generic statements and often exaggerated, back them by evidence. We had to collect evidence, and we had to create organizations that bring together scientists, experts, and focus on providing hard evidence to support the claims. You cannot talk about these issues without talking about Gwyn, but also some very good friends like Alistair Hay and Julian Parry Robinson, who actually supported the cause and commemorated Halabja and Anfas with us throughout. But the area where we concentrated at the time when there was so difficult to get information was to gather robust data ourselves painstakingly, and we list them, publish them, offer them to the media, and then create an environment where it will be difficult for the government to deny the existence of massacres and Halabja events. I will not talk about what I want to talk about here because of time, but I'll tell you that under tough circumstances when you could have jeopardized your lives, we managed to get people like John Foran and Gwyn Robert and others to go to Turkey to bring back samples, serum, samples of bread that after poisoning of refugees, sample of soil. This is myself way after that, and the 1992 collecting more specimens. We actually tested these in laboratories, in universities, in centers of excellence in Britain and elsewhere. We provided scientific data. We published them in The Lancet, in Middle East Health. In fact, these journals even managed their way into Iraq without Saddam knowing. So these supported our campaign such that nobody could deny, because the difficulty we had was that we were always faced with the question that our claims were questioned, and always, as previous speaker said, evidence was required. I'll be very quick. So the evidence we gathered was so robust, so reliable, that they were even used in Tony Blair's dossier in the build-up for the war. And many of our quotes in these publications were cut and pasted in that dossier. We had to get ourselves heard. We used any means available. You name it, we did it. Demonstrations, we went to church. Bishop Huddleston, who was the friend of Nelson Mandela, he was heroic in supporting us and giving us access to a church that we broadcasted prayers to the people, the victims in Turkey. We communicated with the minister at the time. We managed to get them committed to say their official state or policy towards Halabja. Many of you remember the Iron Lady, the wonderful Mrs. Thatcher, who actually made such a big difference in persuading the British and the US government to support the refugees. Actually, some of the people, these children and the women, are in the audience here. But Mrs. Thatcher, the Iron Lady, had built an iron fence that was difficult to go through. At the time of Halabja, on the day of Halabja, David Miller was said to be in Baghdad. And actually, within weeks, Tony Newton went to Baghdad to double the credits for buying arms in Iraq. And of course, trade was the main issue on the main agenda of the time. At the time, we managed to get evidence for the involvement of so many companies, and this was the reason why George Shultz actually said what made the difference in silencing the world against Saddam. and he actually wanted to blame Iran. Against that background, and on top of that, we had all the Arab countries lobbying for Saddam. One day, myself, Dr. Barham Saleh, Hushar Zebari, and a few others, we went around the Security Council embassies to try and tell them what's happening and express our anger. At the same time, Ghazi Reis of Kuwait, Sadiq al-Mashad, and Sheikh Nasser al-Manqur of Saudi Arabia, they went to the same places to say the Kurds were lying. This is what we were against. And every one of these countries paid the price afterwards, paid the price of their support to Saddam. These people need to be made to apologize. Apology means something. It makes a difference. We are here to actually get the recognition for the genocide. We need to make people aware, but also we need to make people apologize and pay for it. And all these companies that were supporters, illegally supporting Saddam, brought to justice and actually made to pay for it. It doesn't matter how many years after that. So my final word is we need to invest in the diaspora. We need to invest in our networks. We need to be realistic. We need to really get this to another stage. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much indeed. We really are running out of time. There's one more speaker who is not Dr. Ihsan, but his son, if you could come up, and he only actually has 2 minutes. So you're going to have to show a lot of discipline because you'll be standing between people and their lunch, which is going to get cold, and a short film as well. So I'm sorry about that, but just 2 minutes, please.
No problem. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to give you a glimpse of my country. Iraq, also known as Mesopotamia, was known as the cradle of life and was a civilization that started over 7,000 years ago. Not only was it one of the first civilizations to give birth to language, it was also one of the first nations to take full advantage of the wheel, something that's indisputably the most incredible invention to date. However, since this archaic vision of the past, the establishment of modern Iraq in 1921 has heralded some of its darkest days, some of which may even be qualified to describe as some of the darkest in human history. As a 17-year-old British citizen and an Iraqi descendant, it's an incredible honor to speak to you as one of the generation who has heard from fathers and grandfathers the harrowing details of the times that have come to pass. And honored to an even deeper degree that it is my generation who now have the responsibility to carry and sustain this knowledge for my children and my grandchildren and ensure the suffering and oppression never comes to light in Iraq's future. Iraq's opposition of several groups worked tirelessly to uncover the former regime's crimes and has held several conferences on this subject. For instance, the Conference of Saddam Regime's Crimes in Tehran, December 1983, Conference of Supporting Iraqi People in Tehran again in December 1984, the Charter of National Iraqi Opposition Cooperation in Damascus of December 1990, the Conference of Iraq Opposition Forces in Vienna in June of 1992, gathering the meeting of the National Assembly of Iraqi Opposition in New York in December 1999, and the Conference of Iraqi Opposition in London in October 2002. The late Ayatollah Sayyid Abdul Aziz Al Hakim established the Center of Human Rights in Iraq, and this center aimed to document and uncover the atrocities of the former regime and unveil it to the eyes of the world. I'd like to give you 2 examples of the support Iraqis gave to each other and to the Kurds. This was inspired by the late Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ihsan Al Hakim, the high spiritual leader of the Shias in the world between 1957 to 1970. In 1967, during the time of the Arab regimes, Sayyid Al Hakim issued a fatwa against the persecution and oppression of Iraqi Jewish families, to treat them fairly and not to oppress them. This fatwa was issued in response to several attacks against Iraqi Jews following the Six-Day War of 1967. In 1969, Sayyid Al Hakim issued his renowned fatwa forbidding fighting against the Kurds. This fatwa was issued in response to the Ba'ath regime conferences of religious figures who supported war against the Kurds. Until today, This fatwa is remembered by all Kurdish and Iraqi people as a shining light representing the spirit of cooperation and peace among Iraq's ethnic and religious groups. I would like to deeply thank you for gathering your efforts and remembering the victims of the Kurdish genocide and all victims of the former tyrannical regime that choked Iraq. And finally, on behalf of ISCI, the party which my father represents, and on behalf of the Iraqis of my father's generations past and my own generation's future, I would like to thank Bayan Sami Abdul Rahman, Kurdistan's regional government high representative to the UK, and the chairman for their invitation to address you today with this speech. Thank you very much.